Johnson, and this is Focus on Liberia. Hit it! From Cape Mount to Cape Palmer, Mount Nimba to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Pocondre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Yeah, focus on Liberia. For Liberia, Liberia. For Liberia, yeah, 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 yeah. From Monday to Sunday. From Monday to Sunday. It's focus on Liberia. Talk about home affairs. Hey. In diaspora. Current affairs. Reliable information. History. Ooh. Talking about culture. Yeah. Politics. Education. Entertainment. Business. Sports. Advertisement. Articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday. Focus on.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another session of Focus on Liberia. I am your co-host, Gabriel. Today I have Professor Larry in the studio with us, and we have a very special topic to talk about. Well, I don't know if you want to call it special because it's been, I think I've seen it, make the rounds on social media, and a lot of people were talking about. And this is the concession agreements by Letty. If I think that's how you pronounce them. That's the acronym, Letty. But today we want to look at those companies, but specifically we want to look at just the basic. This is going to be a two parts sessions. So today we want to do part one, basically just looking at the basic aspect of it, what goes into a concession. These are heavy duty contracts, and they, usually, as we usually say, the contracts favors the rider. So it contains a lot of stuff in them. Understanding those contracts and the basic what goes into that will basically give you an understanding of what goes into those concession agreement that we normally see our country get into. So today we're just going to give you a lot of overview. Larry has a lot of background in dealing with some of those things in terms of like banking contracts and stuff like that. So he's going to help me steer the ship um, to the destination. Larry, welcome to again. Thank you for joining us. I know you've been you've been in and out, but thank you for coming back here.
Oh yeah, yeah. Usually Saturdays I try to catch up with some personal stuff that during the week I don't have a chance to because of my schedule. But the great thing about Focus on Liberia Marketplace is like the underlying theme, right? It's all about educating the people. I think with like what Nelson Mandela said, right? Education is the weapon we can use to change the world. So let's talk about this concession agreement, right? We see Liberians tend to rely heavily on concession agreement, but what exactly is it? Is it benefiting the people? What can be done about it? Let's talk about it. And people should join this podcast, ask their questions. Maybe they can even give us some hints, and we can talk about some of the concessions agreement out there, some of the issues with it, and some of the benefits. So let's learn from each other.
Yeah. So for you guys in the audience, what I'm going to do, I have a draft World Bank concession agreement here. It's a 40-page, but it is very detailed. Hopefully you can, peruse it and make what you want to make of it. So I'm going to share it with you. You take away what you want to do with it. If I find it, I'll drop it in there. But anyways, So that's what we want to do today. Let's jump into it. And for us, as I said, this is a basic educational uh, process. It's going to be two parts. So we want to do the basic today, and then next week we want to do, the more. It will go into the Letty. I think they have a 40-page report that is out there, and that is very. It contains a lot of data, financial reporting, well, not financial reporting, financial information that we're going to look at and really make a deep dive into it. But for today, we just want to give you an overview because if you understand the foundation of what a concession is, then once you get into any, if you come across any of those concessions, you're able to make sense of what to glean from it, where to look, what to, and how to make sense of it. So that's the basic of this. So again, we want to talk about what is a concession agreement. Um, um, Larry, do you want to? I think I have a thing here. Um, so from this is a general overview of what a concession agreement is. So a concession agreement is a basically, as I said earlier, is a contract that gives a company, the right to operate, specific business within a government jurisdiction or another firm's property. Yes, you can have concession on another company's property to operate there. So that's what a basically what a concession is. And this is usually, you know, this is subject to particular terms and agreements within that concession agreement. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Um, Larry.
Yeah, I think the main word in there is contract, right?
Mhm, mhm,
So you're having sort of meeting of the minds between two parties. The
yeah.
country that holds the usually when we talk about concession agreements, usually we're looking at countries, right?
Mhm,
A lot of concession agreements take place in Africa and Latin America. So this is a situation where the country may not have the capacity to take their natural resources and turn it into some sort of a finished product. But the country also needs money.
right.
So rather than try to, if they need some way to access money or capital for investments, one way to raise that money is to connect with a company, usually whether it's in China, it's in the United States, it's in Europe, and tell them, look, listen, for you loaning or lending me, let's say 500 million,
Mhm,
I will give you the rights to go ahead and take iron ore out of this region in this country, within our country, and then you can use that. So it's just in a contract, and
yeah.
contracts are binding,
Yes.
meaning if you try to get out of it,
Yeah.
there's usually a penalty for doing that.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, just as a basic level, it's just a contract.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it. If you guys are out there, just share the program because this is a great opportunity. So we can talk about what all these concessions agreements going on. We hear people saying 66 bogus concession agreements, all these other things there. So let's talk about it.
Okay. Great takeaway, great opening, and thank you for giving uh, expose on that. So these are hopefully I think I have it. I think I have it. Hold on, there it is. All right. So these are this is the famous slide that has been making uh the round on social media, and I think
There's
for
some sort of
me,
misspelling out there. I see someone saying Bumming Hills. Probably that's a misspelling, or I don't
look at what you already caught without even just a second of just looking at that. I've spent
know.
hours on anything. I didn't even catch that. Um, but this is the slide that it's been making this what do you call it uh, picture here that's been making round on social media, um,
Right.
and I think for me when I look at this, um, as somebody who's deals with concession, not natural resources or anything that have to do with commodity, but these are like on the real estate side, right? For me, the thing that stood out to me are the number of years that these contracts are executed for, like 65, 25, 63 years. I think the average, here is about 65 years. I mean, 25 years, but 63 years, Um, so for me, that's what stood out to me, right? For a lot of reasons, I think those are it's too lengthy for um, a contract, a time for a contract to be executed for. Um, but again, it depends who's, executed those contracts. Larry, when you take a look at it, what are some of the things that stood out to you? Like, uh,
Well, let's look at it from. Let me tell you, when I look at it, the first thing that hit my mind, that touched my mind, was on a politics side of things. People are
yeah,
looking at it and saying, "Oh my goodness, we're mortgaging our
mm,
resources. We're giving
hmm
it away. We're doing this. We're doing that." On the political side, on the when you try to be realistic about it, right? And Gabriel,
hmm
let's be realistic for a second. If Liberia didn't do, I mean, let's all things being equal, let's say they can do a better job with setting the concession agreement.
yeah,
All things being equal, if Liberia didn't do concession agreements, what other way do they have of raising money for development? Or in fact, they just raise money to pay the salaries. What
mm,
other ways do they have?
that's a good question.
Yeah, they don't have anything else.
Yeah, yeah,
So, but then the problem is when I look at it, I'm saying to myself, man, those are so long, long years for this
yeah,
company to be extracting
hmm
resources out of the country. When you look at, for example, let's say, what is iron ore trading at right now? Iron ore is probably trading like around 2000 or so, between 1900 and maybe, yeah, I think around 1900 to $2,000, right? And I
okay,
think gold might be trading like around 7 to 800 a cubic. Imagine somebody in there, they're pulling, let's say, like what HPX is planning to do, but HPX is only pulling the iron ore from Guinea
hmm
and flowing it through Liberia to get to the ports, right? But
hmm
if you look at how much HPX plans to pull out of the
the country,
Mimba range up there by Guinea,
uh-huh,
when you do the math on it,
right,
HPX expect to do this thing for a period of, I think, maybe 5 to 10 years or so. When you look at the
yeah,
math, HPX is going to make anywhere from 10 to 15 billion.
yeah.
Imagine 10 to 15 billion. I was saying to myself, man, how
How
can
much are we
HPX
getting?
do this? Yeah. And then they're giving Guinea and Liberia, I think Liberia, they promised maybe about 500 million or so in development. They're not giving President
Them,
Boyka, or like,
right,
they're not giving them cash. The cost of building the railroad, all of that is factored into how much this 500 million going to be for
right,
Liberian government.
uh-huh,
Guinea is going to be a serious loser as well because the guy who the guy who did the HPX deal,
yeah,
he borrowed a lot of that money to do the
yeah,
HPX deal. So when you ask your question, like what the first thing that jumped at me, I'm looking at it at the concession. I'm saying, man, imagine if Liberia could actually put together the team or let Liberians raise the capital to do this stuff.
hmm
That would bring billions and billions. You can transform Liberia in between 3 to 5 years if you just
with
took
that
your
money,
resources rather
yeah,
than do concession agreement. You
yeah,
do you let Liberians tap into that resources
yeah,
and let them bring the money back to Liberia. You develop your country.
yeah,
You develop your country. You know,
yeah.
but
No, I think that was so the years was something that stood out to me as well. The also I
it's
think
a
you
long
mentioned
time.
the the capital investment that the countries those companies are putting into the the deals also stood out to me as well. But for me, I think the reason why the years stood out to me, as I said, I deal with concession agreement not on the commodity side, but like data centers where these like the Apples, the Visa, the TikTok, they house their data, right?
Mhm.
Companies, people like yourself, if you're wealthy, you invest, you have this big plot of land, you develop it, put heavy duty computer there, you put cooling system there, and you lease it out to the TikToks, the app, or the Facebook and stuff like that, right? Those come with concession. So when I saw the years on these things, right, what stood out to me was the length, because the typical length I usually see with those things are 10 years maximum, right? And then
Mhm.
we have what we call renewal or extension clauses. So if you have an agreement, we have it for 10 years. I say, okay, Larry, there's also, we have a 10-year initial, but there's also two terms of 5 years renewal or two terms of 10 years renewal. The reason why companies do that, which I think stood out to you when you look at the years as well, is because of inflation. If I sign an agreement with you for 500 million for 10 years, that same five at 10 years after that, that same agreement for another 10 years, we shouldn't be signing another contract for 500 million after 10 years, right? Inflation, counting for inflation over the last 10 years, it should be maybe another, it should be maybe a billion at that point, or even higher, right? So
Yeah,
for me, that's what stood out to me. Like, did we even look at the length of time, you
didn't
know,
have a
and
clue.
how much the cost of living is going to be, how much things are going to be worth, that was signing, even if it's 500 million 63 years from now is going to be like a penny to a country that is outside. Is any country, it's going to be penny, right? So we didn't factor in all of those things. So for me, those are some of the things that stood out, from just the instant thought that came to me when I look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, the time frame is way too long.
Right.
You're on point. But the reason why the government tends to do this stuff, and like you said, they don't do a basic feasibility study.
Hmm.
They don't know the true value. Because, well, if they're doing it, I haven't seen any documentation. Maybe somebody on this podcast have seen some document that shows that Liberia has done a feasibility study on the value of the region that they're doing concession agreement with. Maybe we need to see that, but I haven't seen it. So that's, imagine if you try to sell a house. Let's say you try to sell a car.
Hmm.
If you don't do like an estimate, or you don't do an appraisal of that car or that house, you can end up cheating yourself. That's what a concession agreement is looking like, right?
It's
I'm interested
yeah.
in selling my house. I don't know the true value of my house. I go sell it to somebody for 50,000. The person turn around and sell a same house for 300,000. I just cheated myself because I never had the house appraised. That's what feasibility study would do.
Yeah.
But then when you see, I like the point you just made. They're putting this concession agreement for 15, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
But it's not adjusted for inflation because
Yeah.
prices change. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. That's why Liberia is not developing.
Yeah.
A lot of the countries that do these concession agreement, look at places like Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Yeah.
Those guys have a mineral in there that nearly every smartphone, computer, every device on the planet uses the mineral from Democratic Republic of the Congo.
It's
But
Corten.
look how
Yeah.
poor the people are.
Yeah.
There's something inherently wrong with us Africans. I don't know what it is, my man, but we can't seem to we can't seem to do right by our people. The
Mhm.
poverty in the country is too high, and we got all
Very.
the resources.
And it's so let's continue down the slide as well. So that is that, right? I think we talked to you. So uh basically, as we said, this is supposed to be an educational uh series. Next, maybe next week, we will actually dive into the more technical side, not too much, right? So basically, what goes into a concession or the clause? I think Larry kind of touched base on some of these things, like the terms, right? Uh, Insurance. Believe it or not, if you do your feasibility study, if like Larry mentioned, if have we done our feasibility study, we will know that there are higher chances that one of those during the exporting, whether you're taking it from the mining place to bring it across the border, something, an accident could happen. It could impact a village or a town or a county. What do you do? And once that happens, how do you have insurance coverage to take care of that, right? And we also have what's called covenants and curable provisions in a contract. Usually, let's say Larry and I have an agreement with both for you guys to the audience, right? And we said, and you guys say, okay, if you guys break the covenant, these are do A, B, C, and D to cure that, or you have to pay us such and such amount of money to cure that covenant, to bring that, to make it whole again. The same thing we could say, if that happened on your end, you don't hold your end of the bargain. These are the things you're supposed to do. So that's what a covenant and the curable provisions are, right? And I think the next one on there is the payment terms. The payment to the government. We will go into that later on. And again, the percentage of revenue that's supposed to go to the government, which I think uh, where most of this loss is coming in, because we got we got the short end of the steel on the stake on that, right? So
But Gabriel, go
um
back 1 second. Let me talk about something real quick.
yeah,
So everything you have listed over here,
yeah,
this is how in a fair society, in a
right.
fair, just society, that's how
Hmm.
it's supposed to work.
Yeah,
But that's not how it works in Liberia, right?
right.
Because we see the concessionaires, we see the people there who are getting the concession agreement, they're violating the contracts. They're not. I think someone on this podcast, I think in Mansfield or somebody probably mentioned something that the concession agreement is not benefiting some of the communities.
Hmm.
Because some of these concession agreements, they're supposed to put certain amount of money in a certain community.
Yeah,
So those are some of the covenants and stuff that's within the concession agreement. These guys don't do it. And I think we
yeah,
saw something recently. There was a protest and somebody got killed. I'm trying to remember, too many things going through my head right now. But
yeah.
those are some of the covenants. What you listed, Gabriel, that's how it's supposed
Hmm.
to work. But it don't work like that. And when the people there violate the covenants, the contract,
Right.
the terms of the contract in Liberia,
Yep. Yep.
nothing seems to happen because the lawmakers then, for whatever reason, seems to be in bed with some of the people there who are violating the concession agreements. So sometimes it'll write the concession agreement, it'll look nice and juicy for the different
Hmm.
communities and stuff. But in reality, you hear communities complaining, oh, Metal Steel was supposed to invest $10,000 or $100,000 in our community, and Metal Steel never did it. But nothing seems to come out of it.
Yeah.
Nothing seems to come out of it, you know. And the
Yeah.
reason why you don't see a whole lot, well, you can go to the next one and we'll
No,
talk
no, go
about
ahead.
something
Go
else.
ahead. Go ahead. You're
But you
making a
see,
point.
the reason why nothing seems to happen, people don't seem to
Hmm.
protest or fight or deal with it, is because, Monday is tax day in America.
Yeah.
When you're paying taxes and you see the government wasting your tax dollars,
Tax dollars. Yeah.
you're going to get mad and take to the street.
Yeah.
You're going to get mad. If you see the president, you see members of the US Congress wasting your tax dollars, you're going to get mad and take to the streets. That's why you see protests in a lot of countries where the revenue is generated through taxes.
Yeah.
In countries where the revenue is not generated through taxes, the people then don't really talk so much and say, oh, you're wasting my tax dollars, because the revenue is generated through concession agreements.
Hmm.
This is what happened in places like United Arab Emirates, the Gulf states, where a lot of the revenue was generated through oil.
Yeah.
But eventually, the people then got pissed off because in 2011, we had the Arab Spring,
Yeah.
because the corruption was just massive in those countries. And then we saw it going from country to country to country because these Gulf regions, as rich as
Hmm.
they were putting some money into education, but not putting as much into it. But they weren't taxing the people. But the people just got fed up with it and said, look, you know something? We're going to take a stand. So Liberians don't really step up because they're not paying the revenue for the
Don't
government.
pay
It's not coming
taxes.
from
Yeah.
tax. They're not coming from taxes.
Yeah. And that's, we don't have that employment base to say people, like, at the end of every year, everyone in the country file their taxes to pay, to
Mhm.
determine whether the government owe them or they owe the government, right? To pay taxes. In Liberia, I don't think that is a requirement. So, like, I agree with you. If we were paying taxes, imagine you paying taxes over 10 years, 20 years period, and the
Yeah.
government's taking out money to go, uh, you know, do other things with it that aren't benefiting you
Just pay
or
their
your
salaries
community or
with it.
your county. You'll be
Yeah,
the
or fly
first
private
person.
jets.
Yeah, exactly. You'll be the first person out. You'll be, matter of fact, you'll see more people caring about these things than they do. But I agreed. Absolutely. Um, all right. So let me see here. So, all right. So, and I'm still trying to figure out how to share that document with you guys. So this was actually taken directly from a concession agreement, a draft one from the World Bank. Um, it's actually a port agreement concession. So I think one of the things we talk about are the terms. So the concession terms, it's usually, as I said, is subject to extension or termination, right? So meaning like so this one was the initial term was 15 years. So comes the 15 years term, there's we can decide whether we want to renew that or we want to terminate it. And the renewal or the termination is will be contingent upon whether either Larry or myself or the concessionaire and the other government involved are holding the end of the bargain, right? This is a port. The reason why I brought this up, this is a port concession. It is only 15 years. Our port concession, I think, is about 25 years, right? This is a port concession for 15 years. And there's termination, there's a renewal clause. At the end of this 15 years, both parties will come to the table and determine whether they want to renew that concession or not, right? Um, and again, as I said, they decide the extension period. Let me see what else we have here. We talk about the payment fees. Usually, I think if you look at some of the uh, Larry, cut me off if I'm talking too much, please. Usually, usually you will see an entry fee or a performance fee. So you mentioned some of that, Larry, which is if they, let's say like they pledge to develop the county and without giving the country the money, right? And they're not holding that end of the bargain, that's performance. You can revoke that concession. You can call that contract into question if the company isn't doing that. But usually there's an entry fee to say, okay, at the signing of the concession, this is what you will pay to execute this contract. There's also what we call performance fee, which we just talked about, right? And if you look at the bottom here, there's the royalty part of it, which is calculated. uh, if I figure out a way to share that document with you guys, I will share it with you because it gives you a good understanding of how concession work. So there's usually a royalty fee um, in those concession. Uh, I think I'm. Let me relax before we go to the next one. Larry, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, you're sharing a document from the World Bank,
Right.
but here's the thing: when you look at people like the World Bank and the IMF, like let's
Yeah.
say, for example, where Liberia is right now, and I
Right.
think that Mansfield mentioned where can Liberia be able to raise the kind of capital, the kind of money they need to do some of the work they need to do. So here's the problem, and this is why Liberia struggles the way they struggle. They're in a catch-22.
Mm-hmm.
They can't go and raise the capital they need to raise the capital because the IMF, because when Liberia went and entered the extended credit facility program in 2019, the
Yeah.
IMF made it as part of that program that you cannot borrow money unless you're borrowing money through concessions. This is why Liberia is in this cycle of concession agreement. Even if they were in a concession agreement, I haven't seen them show an interest in trying to raise money some other way.
Mm-hmm.
So here it is. You need to raise at least $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And you, Gabriel, and I see you post things about other countries that are raising $1 billion here and there. I think you're not sure maybe Ghana or some other countries are
Ivory
raising
Coast. Yeah. Yeah.
Ivory Coast. You need to raise $1 billion. You can raise that $1 billion the same way Ivory Coast, the same way Ghana has done it. You can raise $1 billion the same way the HPX guy did it. The guy who got the HPX deal, the HPX company, the deal, he borrowed. This is what, when I say that, sometimes I look at it, I just laugh. Gabriel, here's what the guy did.
Hmm.
The same thing Ghana did, the same thing Ivory Coast did. The guy went to Wall Street. He borrowed the money
Mm-hmm.
because they issued debt. So he borrowed the money and then he went over to Guinea and he purchased the concession. deal. And the
Mm,
concession is so sweet. This guy's going to make billions from it.
yeah.
So he borrowed a few $100 million from Wall Street. He goes to Guinea. He get a concession agreement. But then just in case there was a threat of him losing his money, he
Hmm.
goes to the World Bank and he takes out a what is called a political risk insurance.
Hmm. Yep.
Just in case, because he know Africa stuff that happens, right?
Yeah.
So the new president he can cancel a concession agreement. So he goes and he takes a political risk insurance that guarantees repayment to Wall Street in case something happens to the money he borrowed from Wall Street to buy the concession. He's covered. The guy covered all his bases.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Wow.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in getting, let's say, $100,000.
Yeah.
I don't have it. I go to
Right.
my man, Reverse Pro.
Right.
I said, Reverse Pro, I need to borrow $100,000. Reverse Pro said, Larry Kennedy, what are you going to do with that money? I said, my
Yeah.
man, listen, I'm going to buy a concession agreement in Liberia that's
Hmm.
going to allow me to to make $1 million. Reverse Pro said, but wait a second. You only need $100,000 to make $1 million? That
Hmm.
sounds good. What kind of guarantee do I have? I said, Reverse Pro, your $100,000 is covered. In fact, guess what? I'm going to go to my man, Gabriel, and I will get insurance from Gabriel that if anything happened to this deal,
You're
Gabriel will
covered.
pay the $100,000 to you. So you
Yeah.
covered. What am I risking? I don't really have a skin in the game. The only thing I'm
Yeah.
doing is I'm making a deal between Riverside Pro. I'm making a deal between Gabriel. I'm
Yeah.
sitting in the middle and I'm going to make almost $800,000 to $900,000 or
Yeah.
$100,000. That's what the guy did.
Yeah.
That's what the guy did. And
Wow.
I was just fascinated because this is what people do on Wall Street all the time.
Yeah.
You borrow
Yeah.
money from one person. It's called leverage, right?
Yeah. Leverage.
You borrow money from one person, you go to Africa, you buy concession agreements, you turn around, you pull all the minerals out of there, you sell it on the open market, you make billions.
Yeah.
You pay by Wall Street, you pay a little small percentage goes to Africa, go to Guinea. You're using a railroad through Liberia to take it to the port of where's the port they're taking it to, man? Is it in Grand Bassa somewhere?
Uh,
Uh,
Budokan.
Port of Buchanan. Yeah,
Yeah.
the guy got his bases covered. He got his bases
Wow.
covered. The same thing is happening over in the Lobito corridor. That's another one.
Mhm.
Go on Google and check it out. I know about that one because I
Mhm.
was involved in something with it recently.
Yeah.
So the concession agreements, I think Mansfield probably mentioned it,
Mhm.
is hurting Liberia in the sense that it's not benefiting the people. But then on the other side, Liberia doesn't seem to have a choice in terms of how to raise money. So they go with a concession agreement. But there's a better way. They just got to bring people who do banking. Gabriel, you do banking. You know, you've seen these things. Eh? They got to bring a team that does international banking to help them do this stuff. 5, 10 year concession agreement. Raise the money. When you do that concession agreement 5, 10 years, stop after you raise the money. You now start doing your own mining
Yeah.
by letting other Liberians come in and do it. Don't let the government do it. We got to go put a brother, mom, sister, uncle, pa, uncle, somebody in Latino go do it. It will not work. But let Liberians
Yeah.
do it and let the money stay in Liberia.
Yeah. It's I didn't even think about it that way. What the guy was able to do. It's like
Mhm.
pretty much that's what sophisticated borrowers do on like I said, Wall Street. They will borrow money and then they will buy what is called a swap, a default swap. So meaning
Yeah,
they will protect
credit default
the
swap.
in
Yep.
case, right,
CDF. Mhm.
to protect that borrowing against the volatility on the interest market, and they're
Mhm.
just covered, right? You make $100 million investment. Sometimes that credit default swap, will cost you probably 2.5, depending on what 2.5 million or 5 million, but it protects you for the interest rate going up and down. I think that's what he did. He go
Yeah,
borrow money, go to the World Bank, they give him insurance,
yeah.
sit in nicely. Well, you start war in our country, I still get paid. You come and
You get paid.
elect the president who comes in and say, oh, we don't want to deal with this guy.
You
I
get
still
paid.
get paid. Nothing.
Yeah.
I, but the part that I think someone said, I don't know if it was Mansfield that said it. It's the political will. I think you alluded to that too, right? Which is the World Bank come in and say we cannot borrow money, but we have to do it through concession agreement, you know, and we just conform to that without pushing back to say, hey, why can't we do that? Or why can't I, if I want to tap into my citizens that are out of the country, why can't I do that? You know, that's the part that still confuses me.
Yeah, I think they can tap into. I don't think they can. You say, and Liberia doesn't have credit, right? Liberia doesn't have
Right,
credit rating from the
right.
big three, right? But I think Liberia can do it by tapping into the diaspora. If you set something up where you have the diaspora willing to invest in mining from Nimba, right?
Hmm.
Let's say Wologisi, you want to open up Wologisi or something.
Hmm.
If you set something, because you're going to make money, you're going to make money. The fact that the price of iron ore, look at the price of gold. We got gold, oil
Hmm.
palm. So if Liberia set something up where we say, look, something, let's raise maybe 500 million through the diaspora,
Hmm.
and we will guarantee that money because we will offer a concession on mining over in one of those ranges, one of those areas where these concessionaires will come in. You can do it. You got to get the diaspora involved. But I think I can see all of the comments over here. People saying, "Hey, Liberia senators are talking about U.S. visa." I heard a
Oh,
conversation. Let me say something,
oh,
Mansfield, real quick about that U.S. visa thing. The part that they don't understand or they're not talking about. Let me say something about it real quick. One of the reasons why Liberians are having issues with visa is because when President Trump when President Trump issued an executive order, if I remember correctly, he issued an executive order uh, restricting visas to certain countries. The reason was these countries, people are overstaying their visa. When you
ah,
overstay your visa,
yeah.
it creates an issue for the US government. And then, second, is some of these countries, especially Liberia, they
Hmm.
had issues, they have passport issues, the diplomatic passport thing. They had a whole passport fiasco.
Yeah.
So, the American government felt that there were people who were leaving other countries, going to Liberia, getting Liberian passport, people who, if they left their country, come to America, probably won't get visa.
Hmm.
But they were going through Liberia to get visas to come into America. So those are some of the reasons why America was concerned and it restricted. So if you read the executive order that President Trump passed, you will see it specifically say that in there. Yeah, they're talking visa and those are the things that are killing Liberia. But I think this topic that Gabriel brought up, I think that's an important topic right there.
So, I mean, I'm kind of baffled, seriously. Um, I didn't hear about the whole visa conversation, but I think um, that was, if that's what they're doing, given what is happening in the country,
Yeah. they're talking they're talking about stuff that don't have any values. Those guys should be talking about job creation. I don't hear conversation about job creation. You hear people that are fighting for 10-year positions
mhm,
because we don't have a private sector. So everybody want to work in the government. That's why even the previous administration, people who are sitting in 10-year positions were fighting to sit in there because when if they were to leave that position, they probably won't get a decent paying job in Liberia.
yeah,
You know, people that are Wilson Tapper that were fighting for 10-year positions. I'm like, my man, you had your opportunity. You should have created an environment where you can find job in the private sector. But Wilson Tapper, they ain't doing none of that stuff. Then today, the new government want to put somebody in that position and they say, oh, I got 10-year position.
yeah.
Do away with all
I
that
mean,
nonsense.
for that, it's an age old problem that we have, and like you said, is basically the simple solution is creating a private sector. This is why I think I always say you see when people leave the government, they just wait on the sideline and tag themselves to the next hot candidate to get right back in there. You'll never see somebody leave the government and go say, I go work for this think tank in Liberia, or I go work for these big corporation in Liberia, or I go teach at the university because I don't want to get back in government. Yeah, everybody just wait on the sideline and
All
uh,
government job.
just wait on the sideline and tag themselves to the next hot ticket item. I mean, candidate. Um, but yeah,
Some people right now probably sitting for the next 5, 6 years for their opportunity to come into
at the,
government. Can you
yeah
imagine?
at the reshuffling when the reshuffle happened the second one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Not doing anything with their lives, just sitting waiting for
Yeah.
2029 because then would be their chance to come into the government. Are you kidding? I mean, seriously, you can't be doing
Yeah.
something in the meantime.
But I think part of it, what is limiting our ability for private sector's jobs to come in our country, I think is the electricity thing. And this is why I was excited when I saw what's his name? What's the senator? Amara. Um, very pushing on the board and then the CEO of LEC to really hold them to account to make sure that they're doing their job. But I think that I don't know if that was a political ploy or whatever. He kind of relented a little bit on that. It kind of fizzled out. I don't see him doing that because that's for me. As somebody who traveled was across West African country, I think with that, if we can just have even 24-hour electricity in our country, it will do a lot of wonders. I think it limits the cost. It, the cost of doing business in a country like that, where you have to pay cost of fuel for generator, it kind of seep into your profit margin. So it doesn't make sense to you know even if you're running a business, it's not really profitable because most of your cost is going into that. So when I saw him really pushing on this guy to really make sure that LEC would transform, I was excited about it. That was
But Gabriel,
yeah.
that's my problem with that. I didn't see it, but here's my problem with that.
Mhm.
He was the Minister of Finance,
He was. Yeah.
Planning, and Economic Development.
Yeah.
So when he held that role, shouldn't he have developed the electric sector, the power sector?
Yeah. That was
When he
yeah.
held that position, he should have put a plan in place that was going to lead to the economic development of which he was a part of.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear people like McGill complain or Amarakona complain, or even now we're going to see when they were there, why they didn't do it.
Yeah. It's sometimes. So here's and I don't know if I think I might be dressing my own devil here. I think the excuse I want to make for him, I think at the time he was in that role, I would say this to him as well. I don't think he was prepared to be in that role at the time he was. I don't think he understand what he was up against, what he
And
had to
that was
do.
that's the problem.
I think that was I think Ellen just got him in there maybe because but in terms of really putting as somebody at that time who really know what he was doing, I don't think he did. And I think
Mhm.
maybe looking back now he'll be able to admit to that. So when I right now, if you were to put him in that role, I think he knew exactly. I think he's a more mature, more experienced individual now. But so when I saw him, you know, campaigning for this thing, I was really pushing for it because once you can solve, just focus on that, solve that one problem, you will solve a lot of fundamental problem. But you know, anyways, I think we're going on a tangent, off a tangent here. Yeah.
But that's what happens when you're talking about Liberia. You can't. It's not just one thing. It will be one
As
thing that
yeah,
lead to another, that lead to
yeah,
another, that lead to another. Because there's no reason you can be 176 or 170 something years old,
yeah.
and you in the top 10 poorest countries in the world.
Mhm.
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know,
I think we're the oldest, right? Were we the oldest or second oldest on the continent?
yeah, Africa's oldest republic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh wow. Yeah.
In terms of
And
independence.
the
Yeah.
second oldest republic in the world behind Haiti, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Haiti
Now
was
look at
first.
where Haiti is.
Yeah.
That's another show all by itself. You know,
Yeah.
but they can solve some of these other issues because if you're doing concession agreement, you can tie concession agreement to maybe bring in or maybe using some of that money to invest in electricity or power generation
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good idea. I didn't think. Yeah, that is a great idea. So let's say like the Putu Mountain, right? I think it's
Mhm.
one of the concession we have, which is in I think Grand Jita. you can have the company put a power plant in Grand Gita to service the entire Grand Gita or the entire southeastern region. It doesn't have to
Mm.
be one power plant that does it. That's actually that's a great idea. That is
They
a
can
great
do it.
idea.
You
Yeah.
can tie that. In
Right.
fact, Ghana did it because Ghana has a concession agreement. No, Ghana set up a data warehouse, an actual like an IT center with a lot of servers and stuff. Ghana
Yeah.
has a concession agreement, one of the largest mining companies in the world. They're US based.
Hmm.
As part of the concession agreement, the company set up they set up a couple of IT centers in Ghana. So
Hmm.
it just depends on the leader. It depends on the leader we have in there who is chasing this stuff.
Yeah.
Ghana actually got something like that done. You can tie that thing into a power grid. But look at all the concession agreements Liberia had over all these years. You know what's scaring me about these concession agreements, Gabriel? You know what's scaring me and what Liberians need to pay attention to?
What's up?
Your resources are not endless.
Ah.
You don't have a uh, uh, an unlimited
Yeah.
amount of resources. People need to pay attention to that. At
Yeah.
some point, you're going to run dry in certain resources. Senegal, they ran dry with a fishery.
Hmm.
They got a concession agreement. I don't know if they managed to get one, but I remember I know they were pursuing a concession agreement to come and fish in Liberia's territorial waters.
Hmm.
So your resources can run dry.
Yeah.
You know what happens then?
Yeah. Actually, what? You're right. And it's so you're looking at it as a infinite game, like an infinite process. Like, hey, these things won't be here forever. What happens
Nope.
once they do, right? You like the what is it, Saudi Arabia? That
Mm-hmm.
as much oil as that country has, they're diversifying away from it. Even with the Aramco that makes about what is it, $2 trillion of revenue every year, right? They're diversifying from oil revenue to make the country more diverse. So if a country that is so endowed with oil is already looking that much beyond its natural resources to say this oil won't be here forever. Let's look at
Mm-hmm.
tourism and other way. We're more about a small country like ours that is uh, you know, pennies here and there, and there that you know, which we have limited amount of. So I agree with you, but
Mm-hmm.
the idea that I think I like more is what you mentioned, where if they're doing a concession, they can tie it to something else, right? Like, hey, we don't have electricity in this place. Put it, build a power plant there that will cover the entire county at least, right? And if you're going to do, and if you look at the concession agreement in Liberia, they put like it seems as if almost every county has a company in there that is exploring some kind of like concession. So
Yeah.
if we were able to think at that level, our electricity to just say, well, let's focus on electricity. Every concession tie power plant, as part of the agreement into it, we will be fully electrified before all those company leaves the country. Yeah.
Yeah, Liberia has a wealth of resources. That's why when you look at the extractive industries, the report put out there by Leti, when you look at it, Liberia has a lot of resources. It's not something that would just last forever. So we need to be careful. We need to be careful with how we do the concession agreements. But we lack the enforcement on the agreements that have been signed. We don't follow through with it. Even if we sue the concession company, the company with the agreement, we have a weak judicial system. That company can end up buying their way into a verdict for
Mhm.
themselves. So there's so many things, and it has to do with the leadership, right? There's so many things
Mhm.
fundamentally wrong with Liberia. It has to do with the leadership. But let me say one thing, and then we'll probably talk about it and circle around it. But here's the thing:
Yeah.
because a lot of the concession agreements is in the extractive sector, whether it's
Yeah.
gold, iron ore, oil palm, all these things, then
Mhm.
you would think people would pay attention to what happened when Ebola hit, because all of the concession companies then they fled the country. The economy nearly collapsed.
Mhm.
We're approaching a situation right now There's a global threat going on because this week, over the past week, week over week, maybe even a month,
Yeah.
the Dow Jones, right? And I know I'm not
Yeah.
gonna, it has been falling.
Yeah.
And the chairman for JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, this
Yeah.
week he made a statement because JP Morgan missed
The
certain
earning
estimates. Yeah, right.
earning target. Sorry.
Their target estimate in
Yeah.
terms of their performance. They missed the
Yeah.
performance estimate, and the market went down. I think almost like 2.5
Yeah.
percentage point or so, like 500 points, something like that. But the statement he made, he said there's a threat in the global economy right now
Mm-hmm.
because we see Iran is threatening to attack Israel.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to expand now. Maybe it may even expand into the region, and you have all
Yep.
of these proxies because when all of that stuff start taking place, it's going to slow things down again in terms of economic growth
Mm-hmm.
because we saw inflation rising a little bit here in the US.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So there's going to be a slowdown in the global economy.
Yeah.
Liberia's gonna feel the pinch. Liberia's gonna feel the pinch because all these extractive things, iron ore is used to make steel, it's used to put up buildings and all that stuff. It's going to slow down.
It's going to slow demand for those things and
It's going to slow demand
subsequently
for this thing.
impact
It's
us
going to
as well.
reduce the revenue going back to Liberia because Liberia get that cut percentage wise in terms of the
Yeah.
revenue from exporting or the deal they have with these companies. So all of that stuff people need to pay attention in the next year or so. Let's see what happens between Iran and Israel because we know Iran is threatening.
Yeah, I think they said the threat, the attack was imminent.
Hmm.
Yesterday, actually, when I look on, as I get to wherever they are, read Reuters, I was looking at Reuters. They said the threat is imminent, like it's something that
Yeah,
was expected in
it's
days.
inevitable.
And
Mhm.
yeah, and
It's going to turn into a regional crisis because Iran is going to go in there. America has this standing order that if you attack Israel, they're going to
the
defend
attack,
Israel. And when
yeah,
they do that, then you're going to see some of the other regions.
yeah,
Iraq will probably get their hands in, maybe even
yeah,
Syria. You don't know.
yeah.
It can expand into a regional war, and that's going to impact a lot of stuff because you already have the
Middle East.
Ukraine-Russian war going on. Then you have this
Yeah.
other one going on. Then watch out, Liberia.
Not just Liberia, but the entire continent,
Oh
the
yeah.
entire continent, because we get, Russia and Ukraine produce most of the grain that goes to Africa. I mean, we saw that in
Hmm.
the initial stages of the war, where the African president just got up and flew to Ukraine trying to go stop war because it was impacting them. Can you
That's
imagine?
so
And
amazing.
like the way you look at it, the way you look at that, right? It's something that I don't think I hope somebody in the government is looking at it from that perspective, and be able to say, okay, these are contingencies. We need to put in contingency plans in terms of if this happen, how can we, whatever resources we need, can we, source it locally here? But again,
Mhm.
I think the biggest thing that you said is the price of commodity that we trade on the global market. The impact is going to happen. If that happen, how do we buttress our revenue that we cannot collect? Because we can't export. There's no demand for those things anymore. You know,
Mhm.
um, could there be another kind of near Ebola incident where the economy almost collapsed?
Everybody
Those
ran away.
that's how, yeah,
We need to
that's how we,
diversify the economy. So
yeah,
we have all we need to make Liberia prosperous.
yeah,
I mean, I love the report these guys put out on the extractive industries. I love the
yeah,
report because it brings to light all the different agreements they have out there, the number of years it's going on for. We just need somebody to come in. President Boyka just started his administration. He's pushing on to 90 days right now. Maybe at
mhm,
some point he will be enlightened to go back, revisit. And you just said you've been saying this thing, the bogus agreement and all those other things. That
yeah, yeah, yeah.
revisit some of these agreements and try to refine them.
But do you think he has that power though? It's before you trigger, and then it goes back to what we were saying earlier, right? Before you trigger something, well, I'm sure that he'll always be able to find something. You have to look at the performances and say, hey, you say you're supposed to do such and such and such in this county. It didn't happen. Well, that gave us the ability to now say, hey, we need to review the agreement. I agree. I think he should be able to do that. You know, um,
It would be easy to find something,
yeah,
some violation within the concession agreement that would allow him to go back. Like you just said, you can look at any number of these concession agreements and say, look, you know something? Maybe the way this concession agreement went through wasn't right, or maybe
yeah,
the company holding the concession agreement have violated some clause in it. Maybe they're supposed to do something in our community,
right,
build a school, build a hospital, and they haven't done it. That's grounds to void the contract, the concession
yeah,
agreement.
yeah.
You know, but then the problem, Gabriel, if they were to do that, they're going to be losing money out on the revenue side of things.
I was going to say something else, which is if you do that, other countries, other companies see you doing that to other companies, they may not want to come in there and do business with you. So,
They may not want to do
but then
business
again, you
with you.
have to look at what's his name, the former president Tolbert did, right? He like to use Percy's word, kamikaze style with Firestone Rubber, right? At the time when he came in, Firestone Rubber was they never used to get audited. They I think they were paying 5 cents per hectare for land in terms of lease. He came there, he changed all of that, right? He just there was no need to say, "Hey, you're not doing it, you're not doing it. This is time have passed, time have changed. You, I mean, if you were to ask him, then he'll probably right now, if you were alive, you were to ask him, he'd probably say, "Hey, I look at it from an inflation standpoint. Inflation made me to do that. You cannot have a lease for 5 cents per hectare that you've been paying. Your company is not, you know, is not being audited by the government. You just the way because of the way it was structured. The current president can do the same thing. He can say, you know what, like you said earlier, just basically the way this thing was drafted didn't make sense. It doesn't support it doesn't favor the Liberian people. I think it was, it put us at a disadvantage, and we want to have a conversation and make sure that we get a better return on our you know for leasing our resources to you technically. But it's gonna take guts. It take guts, and
It's
I,
going to
I
take a
think
lot of courage, my man. It's going to take a lot
yeah.
of courage. And you know something too? Some of these companies that some of these companies that invest in some of these um, fossil fuels or non-renewable energy kind of product, some of them are
Hmm.
wising up. You just talked about Firestone, right?
Hmm.
Years ago, I think right at towards the end of the Ebola crisis, the company that now owns Firestone, BF Goodrich, I believe, right?
Yeah, gorgeous. Yeah.
They have set up a plant. I know they did it years ago in somewhere in Arizona, where they were
Mm.
looking, or they have been doing it. In fact, these guys they realize relying so much on rubber um, doesn't seem to be a long term strategy.
Yeah.
They set up factories now in Arizona where they have been creating rubber from
Synthetic.
cactus. They're creating rubbers. They're creating rubber from cactus. So when I read that, I was like, wait a second, what is that going to do for all of this rubber tapping and all this stuff that's going on in a lot of these countries there where they have been exporting? These people are looking for alternative means
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The hedging.
of the
Yeah.
same product. So
Wow.
when I say these things are not endless, people always try to find another
Yeah.
strategy. I mean, iron ore, I don't see an alternative to iron ore anytime soon,
Yeah.
or gold or anything. But eventually, man, if you don't have a backup plan, diversify your economy, you're always going to be at risk when one of these companies then leave.
Huh. I didn't know that. Um, and I wonder how much they contribute to. I'm sure it's probably in the. It is not a probably. It is in the that document that we're talking about. But I didn't really look at it. How much in terms of how much Firestone contribute to the revenue
Yeah, I
of
think it's
Liberia.
somewhere, I don't know. That's a great question. Because a lot of times, I think, I don't know that River Sales Pro, somebody mentioned it. A lot of times they're too secretive. They hide too many things. It's not like in other countries where you can find that information. How much money does this company contribute in terms of investment to the US? I
Hmm.
can go to the US Department of Commerce website and I can see any particular company in terms of how much impact they have on the US economy. You can't find that information easily in Liberia, even if it does exist. You know, yeah,
Yeah,
River Sales Pro.
I think on our end, I think we do it intentionally because of the scheming that happened in the background that we don't want to reveal those things because once you start putting those things in the public, people will be able to say, hey, the company promised us $5 million. We only got three. What happened to the other 2 million, right? And so
Yeah,
they keep it secret, so they won't be able to people won't be able to hold them accountable. I agree with Robert says here. He said companies look out for themselves too. Too much instability in Africa. They don't want they don't want to commit resources and heavy machinery. Um, I think another person who's a big advocate for those companies is William. And sometimes I tend to agree with him in terms of those. And I think you mentioned something too, which kind of counter his point. Like those resources are there in the country, but I think there's also an inability for Liberian, like you said, to pull their fund and invest in those things and really make sure they have some level of shares or equity in those companies, right? But I think what William always usually says is that if a company is coming to put all this, hard capital into that, they deserve some level of, returns for their money. So you cannot just say
yeah,
somebody coming here to because like you said, you go borrow money from somewhere, you come and put it into an investment, you want to get a return, right? I cannot sit back and say, oh, Larry came in and invest all this money and now I want a 50-50 share with him. It doesn't work that way. Um,
that's the first thing you learn in banking and finance. In business,
yeah,
you're there to
yeah,
maximize the stockholders' wealth,
yeah.
right? So somebody investing, yeah, River Sales Pro, you're absolutely correct. Their companies are looking out for themselves because they're there to maximize their profit. You know, so but you see, that's why we have lawmakers and we have leaders
Hmm.
to make sure that we balance this company's interest
Hmm.
alongside the Liberian people owner interest.
Hmm.
Because I think now companies then have changed their model because a lot of times it was, hey man, we got to do what we got to do to maximize profit. But now they're all trying to do it now in what is called a socially responsible way because they all seem to
Hmm.
have some social responsibility on a lot of the company website. But companies are doing what Liberian lawmakers are doing. They're looking out for themselves. So, you know, Africa is shaky. There's a lot of instability. That's why the HPX guy went and purchased political risk insurance. Africa is shaky. How many coup d'etat we see in Mali?
Yeah, especially that the West region is always, there's always something going on in the West. Like for
Yeah,
some
the
reason we,
West
we
region
tend to
I think
be,
had one of the highest coup d'etat
yeah,
in all of Africa.
we always tend to be a little bit kind of hard-headed people.
Because we don't seem to
Senegal's,
get good leaders, man. The leaders that come in and they just waste their resources, enjoy them and benefit themselves. And the people after a while get fed up. But I mean, I never support coup d'etat for the mere fact that if you have a coup d'etat, it opens the Pandora box for others to follow and do the same thing.
yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. So we were on an hour mark here. I don't think we don't have enough comments here. Um, Mansfield was busy, but he got quiet. Let me go to. He said, "I'm talking about our extracted commodity have never benefited us as a country. These things cannot be replenished." I think, yeah, you're right about that. He said, "We got to develop national plan on how they will benefit our country." Um, let's see here again. I think he moved away. I read that. and I think I shared this one. He said he's multilateral. So you talk about the multilateral agency. You said there are, you know, it's a multilateral agency. Are the appendages of you know colonialism? You know, um, I don't know if you want to stray in that direction. In a
Well,
way, I
there are neo-colonialists entering Africa. It's been going on over the past
right,
several years, and HPX is one of them. The
right,
Libido corridor is one of them. China is another one. What they're doing is they are coming to Africa and sucking up. Rather than come in and take over a country, they're coming in now and taking over the resources with concession
hmm
agreements. So there's a new type of colonialism taking place, and Africans kind of need to pay close attention and find ways to make sure that resources are benefiting the people and not just leaving the continent, you know. But yeah, there's something going on in terms of, and America is investing a ton of money. If you go and you see uh, Vice President Kamala Harris, the trip that she made over to I think it was over to Zambia. I don't know if it was. I think between Zambia and there are three countries involved in this libido
hmm
corridor. They're going to use that to extract a ton of resources out of Africa over the next several years. A ton. Yeah, I don't know those countries are going to benefit. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to benefit.
yeah. And where was that? You know, at anyway, let me read this comment. So where was that process? I believe that Lemco had a long-term goal of staying in Liberia. Look what the war did. All right. Since then, companies been reluctant to heavily invest. I don't think I don't remember Lemco because, but I've heard of it. I heard it was um, you know, one of the I think what was it, 30 plus company that were in Liberia under
Mhm.
Tauber's time, um, and they really did well in the country. But um, I don't. I think from what I heard, they have factories in Liberia as well. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, uh, but I don't remember much about them. Um, but you're right. There's not a lot of companies going back in Liberia since the war. There's the level of seriousness you have will determine how many companies come back to you or see you as an investment destination. So I agree with them.
Some
So
some countries are making a good effort to draw companies over to their respective countries
mhm,
because they have what you call investment promotion agencies. Some
mhm.
smart countries out there, and I think Liberia, I don't know if they've reestablished their own investment promotion agency, but
We
you
have the
need an
NIC.
investment promotion agency. Yeah,
Yeah.
you need something like that with a strategy, with an objective to travel to the US, travel to Europe, travel to Canada, travel to Australia, and then meet with various companies and put your case on the table as to why those companies should invest or come to your country. But going back to what you said earlier, Gabriel, you will have constraints like power
Mhm,
and things like that. We can solve the power thing. you know, we can use renewable energy to solve the power thing. We can set up solar farms. We
mhm.
can do those things, you know. But when you spend over almost 90 or 97% of your budget on paying salaries, how much do you have left to do
To
that kind of
to
infrastructure project?
uh, exactly. That was the point that I was trying to make. All right. And it's not. And I think you keep going back to it. It's not about whether to solve the problem or not. It's whether somebody is thinking as you are saying right now, as you are thinking right now, like this is a big problem and we see it as an impediment to growth in our country. So let's look at way to solve it. I think those senators in our country, they're just what I call lame ducks. They just like they have this tunnel vision in terms of what they want to do in the county, but in terms of looking at it from from a county to a country and how that could, you know, you know, benefit the rest of the country from a county level. I don't think they're looking at it, and
They
that's
lack the
on them. And they
experience
have,
and they're not
yeah,
willing to hire people.
Right. And I kind of want to give them the benefit of the doubt too. The president should be thinking that way too, right? You come in, you like by the time you spend 6 years campaigning. If you come in, you should know exactly where your short-term goals are, the immediate and the long term, and what are things you need to do to really, you know, open the country up. That doesn't the case that you make, right, about the investment road trip. Ireland. Ireland is one of the biggest, it has one of the biggest tax breaks for multi corporation, right? It's part of what we call the double Dutch sandwich in a corridor as well. A lot of companies set up there. When they got ready, for a while, you see most of these big U.S. corporations you see right now, they have offices in Ireland. They did exactly what you just said. They put an investment team together that were going to come into America and pitch into these companies. And not the government to say, oh, we want the US. No, they were going to these mega company. These are the tax advantages in Ireland that you get. It puts you in the Eurozone. And so they did a roadshow. They went on a roadshow. And as a result, they're still benefiting from that up to now. There are, I think, over 300
Mhm.
US big corporations that have, you know, offices in Ireland. You know,
Yeah.
higher
Oh, and
you know,
thanks,
Irish
Joy,
people.
for mentioning Bridgestone. I think I said BF Goodrich. Firestone is
Bristol.
actually owned by a Japanese company. Yeah, and it's actually
Okay.
Bridgestone. I had that BF Goodrich thing on my mind, but it's actually Bridgestone. And Bridgestone has been doing something new now to find some alternative to using the tap rubber for
Mm.
making tires. So, yeah, and people still believe that Firestone is actually owned by an American company. It's not. It's owned by Japanese. I think Bridgestone is owned by a Japanese family. You know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then Jimmy said the extractive. I think we should be wrapping up. The extractive industries are exhaustive. You know, we need to plan what will happen after they leave. You know, that has to be incorporated in. Has to be incorporated from the jump. Okay, I thought you said Trump.
That's a
Still
great
going.
point. What
Yeah.
happens if those companies were to leave? What's the strategy?
Yeah.
That's a great point, Jimmy.
Yeah. And before we wrap up here, I know this is a. He said, well, a lot of companies set up there. We need a national agenda that each administration completes a portion of it. Instead, uh, we have each administration, right? Bad mouthing the prior, blaming the prior, and there is no continuum uh, of national plan for the development. I think you mean there's no continuum of the national plan of development.
Jimmy, bad mouthing is on the national plan.
Yeah,
Jimmy's right. Yeah, they come in and they think they spend so much energy, so much effort to badmouth the previous administration, to undermine the previous administration, to do everything to sabotage and not focusing on the things that really matters to the people. You know, and when you talk about Ireland, Ireland. I was talking to one of my buddies yesterday. I think he mentioned his wife works for Accenture, right? Pretty
hmm
big tech company, and a lot of those companies they've gone to Ireland. The U.S. government, when they issued bonds or treasuries to borrow money, they borrow a ton of money for Ireland. And what kind of resources does Ireland have? Not really a whole lot. But what Ireland managed to do, they managed to put a lot of money into education and train a lot of people and set up some tax systems to bring companies over to Ireland. They set up the infrastructure. So it's like what Jimmy said. You need a national strategy. You need a national strategy to drive
yeah,
people to drive companies to your country. You can do it. Sometimes it's just a phone call.
yeah.
Let me give you an example. So, in fact, I still have I shared an email with someone who was interested in checking it out one time. A few years, I think a couple, 2 or 3 years ago, USAID put out a grant. They were interested in finding a company that would be willing to. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but maybe I'm just repeating myself. But they wanted to find a company that would be willing to produce paint, a mold resistant paint in Liberia. You know, a lot of houses in Liberia has mold, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So I said, okay, this sounds like a good challenge. Let me see what I can do. So I first I contacted I have a buddy that works over at USID. He's top guy at USID, and he put me in touch with the person who was actually in charge of that grant. So I spoke to the guy in charge of the grant. We exchanged emails, phone calls, and stuff. So he told me, he said, "Yeah, this is exactly what we're looking for." He said, "Because right now Liberia gets a lot of more resistant paint from Ghana,
Hmm.
but we think this is an opportunity to see if we can maybe partner with a US based company." So I made a lot of phone calls. Eventually, I found a company in Florida that makes mold resistant paint.
Hmm.
And the company was willing to partner with somebody on the ground in Liberia to set up a light manufacturing place to do mold resistant paint.
Hmm.
USAID was going to put up $3 million to get the company was excited, you know. So sometimes it's just a phone call. It's just being able to
Wow.
have a strategy, phone call. You can drive investments to Liberia. You can bring companies down there. You let them know the constraints, the power. Maybe you don't have the technical know-how, but you can
Yeah,
train
yeah, yeah,
people.
yeah.
So those things are doable. Those things are doable. People just got to be like what Jimmy said. They got to be creative. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Um, so bringing it back to these concession agreements, um, the fact that I think, excuse me, there's what is it? ArcelorMittal. I think they're looking to pour in more money in the country, invest more money. I think about 200 million in the country. Um, but if you were in charge or anyway, would you encourage that, or would you want to do a revision of the country or review those concessions? Which would be your priority? Would you demand more from those companies to say we need you to invest more in these places or hold your end of the bargain, or would you want to review those concessions and make sure that they initially are doing what they're supposed to do? You know?
No, I would definitely revisit the concession agreement because I want each agreement. I don't want a 20, 30, 40 year agreement, right? I want it
Yeah,
short, like what you mentioned, 5, 10
yeah,
years.
yeah,
But I also want to tie each agreement
yeah.
to a school or a healthcare center. The reason why I'm leaning more towards school
Mhm.
because we need to build the capacity of the young people. We need to educate the young people because that was what Taiwan and Singapore did. That's
Mhm.
what Kenya managed to do. That's what Ghana managed to do. Send a lot of people. You build the education system. So I would tie the concession agreement to something that will impact the Human Development Index, right? The United Nations. So it will be out of education, education, healthcare, creating jobs, one of those things. But do it
Mhm.
for a short period of time because doing it for an extent, it's not a strategy. That's
Yeah.
doing these things there for a long period of time. It's not a strategy. You need to find a way to say, okay, going back to what Jimmy said, how do we transition this now from a concession agreement
Mhm.
to a finished good or manufacturing here? Because the concession agreement, it doesn't create jobs.
Right.
But if we turn that iron ore or the gold or the rubber, the oil palm, into now maybe making soap, because palm oil is in pretty much everything, even orange soda, we got palm oil in it.
Yeah. Oh
If you
wow.
transfer that into a manufacturing, now you're talking about creating jobs for the young children who graduated from college.
Mhm.
Now, so you have to have a plan to say, okay, within 5 or 10 years, or even less than that,
Mhm.
let's take the concession agreement and sure, and you can build some sort of some analytics, some
Yeah.
test to see how it's going to get you to where you need to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you got to bring some technical people around to help you do that. I would just bring a lot of young Liberians in who there's smart people in Liberia.
Yeah.
Bring them to
Right.
the table, help you put that plan together. But we haven't seen this, Gabriel.
Yeah.
We haven't seen this.
All right. So thank you for that. I think we should wrap up. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want us to go over the uh the time here. All right. So my last question to you, which I think should be a final thought, is um, given given what is happening in the country and the business climate that is there, do you think we will see a lot of HPXs coming in to execute similar deal, or do you think that was a one-off situation? Do you think we're going to see other companies coming in to meaning that, do you think the business environment is going to change and we will see, not just construction from a construction standpoint, but companies coming in to leverage even the service sector, to look at other industries to really take advantage of that because of the business environment, because of the environment that is there? Or do you think this is another um, uh, scenario like the we are administration? Or do you want to, or do you think it's just let's wait and see what happens for the next year or two? That was a mouthful of question, but
I know.
yeah.
I personally haven't been very overly optimistic on Liberia changing anytime soon. I haven't been very optimistic, right?
Mm,
And the reason being because when a new administration comes in, there are
mhm,
certain things you have to do right off the top
yeah.
that would set the bar. Going back to Jimmy Eastman's point, it would set the bar
Mhm,
high in terms of ethics, in terms of ethical way you behave.
yeah.
But when new administration come in and they start trying to they start trying to do some backroom dealing stuff, like
Yeah,
they
yeah,
try to
yeah, yeah.
replace the speaker. That's a waste of resources. It tells me that you not focus on the things that would benefit the Liberian people right off the top. Replacing the speaker is a political move. It's not a development move.
Mhm,
So that's one thing that caught me and say, okay, well, maybe we're not ready for prime time yet. Then you start focusing on tenure positions,
mhm,
replacing so people that are fighting for jobs. That still tells me you're not ready for prime time.
yeah.
Then the fact that you came in and you didn't have your entire cabinet already laid out. You know, look at a young man who just became president in Senegal. I think
Mhm,
it was Senegal, right?
yeah. Senegal.
Yeah, he seems to have his he stepped on the pitch with a
Yeah,
game plan to win the game.
yeah.
So, but I'm not overly optimistic. But I would be patient. I would give it time and see. Maybe by the end of this year, maybe something will happen.
Yeah.
But the fact that since this administration came in, the Liberian dollar has been losing value, which
Mm,
means inflation. We got Liberian dollar lose value. People start paying more money for the same thing.
yeah.
I think we need to focus on some of those key elements. But yeah, it
Okay.
was a great conversation, man. So that's my closing point.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I don't think I have any much to say. For me, I think the only thing that as I said, if I were, you know, I kind of tend to favor Tolbert the way he ruled, as a president. And if I were him, if I were, anywhere near that's what I would do. Come in and review all those concessions.
Mm,
I don't care if even it was a concession we signed with God. We will bring it under the table. We'll bring it on the table and still review it. Because I think if you look at for the two that I've ran through, like the moment you read it, you like you get pissed off because you see the you know the the bogusness, for lack of a better word, in those agreement. And if I were, I hope the president will be able to you know develop the courage to be able to call some of these concession to review them. Um, but I think also, like you said, also to piggyback on what you said, to look at the years, the term that we give them are too long, too very long. And you have the ability to renegotiate new terms, renegotiate performance clauses, and all of those things, and make sure that you put people on those. What are the senators that are in those counties? Make sure that they are holding those companies to
mm,
account to do what they're supposed to do. But um, like similar to you, I'm very I'm not. optimistic about this administration, and that's for all the right reason, like you said as well. So, but I too am giving them the grace to say, give them time. Give them time. Let's see what happens. As
Mhm.
I said, there's only one person that I think I have a little bit of hoping if he continue. That's Amar Conan. But besides that, I don't see anybody else doing anything legitimate that catches my eye. I would say this person has the ability to do anything. But as I said, time is a very funny thing, and hopefully, somebody will be awakened within that time to do something very transformative. So um, that's all I have for now. Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Any other parting comment before we wrap up?
No, it was great.
Yeah,
See, the agreements are binding. Comment out there. You cannot abdicate your side of the bargain.
yeah.
They're binding, but I think we said you will always be able to find um, a
You can find
violation
something.
somewhere,
Yeah,
because if
yeah,
they kept up the end of the bargain, you would the people in those communities would benefit.
yeah,
So yeah, sure, breaking an agreement, of course, there's some repercussions to doing that, but definitely, my thing was you were more than likely find a situation where someone have violated the terms of the agreement, and thus making the you can cancel the contract after that. But you know
yeah,
I mean, as it stands, to just go and unilaterally try to cancel it, I don't think that's going to work. But you
yeah,
have to you have to be a little bit more creative than that.
yeah. Well, well, Mansfield, I have no comment on that. I will leave that out there for now. But again, thank you guys, Larry. Thank you for taking the time. I know Saturdays are very important to people, so thank you for taking the time to have the discussion here. I hope
Nice.
you
Hey, thanks, Joy, for
enjoy
the
the
correction, and thanks, Mansfield, for the participation, and thanks, Jimmy. Thanks everyone for
yeah,
watching, man. So that's it for
yeah,
me, guys.
yeah. Thank you guys, and see you guys next Saturday. Bye.
We all have it right. Labira is our